The stagecoach station in Fort Worth, Texas, smelled of dust and desperation, and Catherine Taylor knew she reeked of both as she clutched her threadbare carpetbag and stared at the departing wagon that carried her last hope of reaching San Antonio before her sister's baby arrived. "Wait." Catherine's voice cracked as she stumbled forward, her worn boots catching on the wooden planks of the platform. "Please, I need passage on the next coach." The station master, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained whiskers, barely glanced up from his ledger. "Next coach to San Antonio leaves in 3 days, miss. That will be $8. $8 might as well have been 800. Catherine's fingers trembled as she opened her small coin purse, counting out the meager contents for the third time that hour as if the coins might multiply through sheer willpower. $2.37. Everything she had left in the world after buying her train ticket from Philadelphia to Fort Worth, after paying for the cheapest meals she could find, after scraping together enough to survive the journey west. "I have $2, Catherine said, hating the pleading note in her voice. "Could you perhaps make an exception? My sister is expecting a child and she needs me. She is all the family I have left." The station master's expression did not soften. "Then I suggest you write her a letter, miss, because $2 will not get you anywhere except maybe as far as the general store down the street." Catherine felt the tears building behind her eyes, hot and humiliating. She had traveled over 1,000 miles, survived the death of her parents in the winter fever epidemic, sold everything she owned except the clothes on her back and her mother's silver locket, all to reach her older sister Margaret, who had married a shopkeeper and moved to San Antonio 2 years prior. Margaret's last letter, which had taken weeks to reach Catherine in Philadelphia, spoke of complications with her pregnancy and her fear of facing childbirth alone while her husband traveled for business. "I cannot wait 3 days, Catherine whispered, more to herself than to the station master. "I promised her I would come." "Promises do not pay for passage," the man said, not unkindly but with the firmness of someone who had heard every hard luck story the frontier had to offer. Catherine turned away, blinking rapidly against the brightness of the Texas sun. It was October of 1873, and Fort Worth bustled with activity. Cowboys drove cattle through the streets, merchants hawked their wares, and somewhere a piano played a cheerful tune that seemed to mock her despair. She had never felt more alone or more foolish for believing she could cross half a continent with nothing but determination, and $2 to her name. She sat down heavily on a bench outside the station, setting her carpetbag beside her. The leather was cracked and faded, but it had been her father's once. Inside were 2 changes of clothes, a hairbrush, her mother's Bible, and Margaret's letters tied with a ribbon. Not much to show for 22 years of life. "I cannot afford passage," Catherine cried softly, covering her face with her hands. The tears came then, sliding hot and fast down her cheeks despite her best efforts to maintain some dignity. "Excuse me, miss." The voice was deep and gentle, with the slow drawl of someone who had spent his life under western skies. Catherine looked up, hastily wiping at her eyes to find a man standing a respectful distance away. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard physical labor. His face was tanned and weathered, with lines around his eyes that suggested he spent more time squinting at horizons than sitting indoors. He wore a clean brown shirt, dark trousers, and a wide-brimmed hat that he held politely in his hands. His hair was dark blonde, slightly too long, and his eyes were a striking shade of blue-gray that reminded Catherine of storm clouds over the Atlantic. "I apologize for intruding," he continued, his voice kind. "I could not help but overhear your conversation with the station master." Are you in some kind of trouble? Catherine's first instinct was to refuse help from a stranger. Her mother had warned her about trusting unknown men, especially in rough frontier towns. But her mother was dead, and Catherine was desperate, and something about this man's steady gaze and respectful manner made her want to trust him. "I need to reach San Antonio," she said, her voice still thick with tears. "My sister is there, and she needs me. But I do not have enough money for the stagecoach fare." The man's expression grew thoughtful. He appeared to be in his late 20s, perhaps 28 or 30, with the kind of face that was more interesting than handsome, full of character and quiet strength. "San Antonio is a fair distance. You are traveling alone." "I have no other choice. My parents passed away this winter, and Margaret is the only family I have left. She is expecting her first child and having difficulties. I promised I would be there." "That is a good sister you are," the man said. He studied her for a long moment, and Catherine found herself unable to look away from those storm cloud eyes. "My name is William Preston. I own a ranch about 2 days west of here. I have business in San Antonio myself and was planning to travel there tomorrow with a wagon. I would be honored to offer you safe passage if you would accept." Catherine's heart leaped with hope even as caution whispered in her mind. "I could not possibly impose on you, Mr. Preston, and I have no way to pay you for your trouble." "I am not asking for payment," William said simply. "I am offering help to someone who needs it. The frontier can be a hard place, and I believe in folks helping each other when they can. But you do not even know me. I know you are a sister trying to reach family in need. That is enough." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I understand your hesitation about accepting help from a stranger. If it would make you more comfortable, my housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, will be traveling with us part of the way. She is returning to visit her daughter in Austin, which is on the route to San Antonio. You would not be alone with me." The mention of a chaperone eased some of Catherine's concerns. She searched William Preston's face, looking for any sign of dishonesty or ulterior motive, but found only patient kindness. "Why would you do this for someone you do not know?" she asked. William's expression grew distant for a moment, as if remembering something painful. "Someone helped me once when I had nothing. I suppose I am trying to pay that kindness forward." He met her eyes again. "But I will not press you, Miss Taylor, Catherine Taylor, Miss Taylor. The offer stands, but the decision is yours. I will be staying at the Cattleman's Hotel tonight and departing at dawn tomorrow. If you decide to accept, meet me at the hotel at first light. If not, I wish you the best of luck in reaching your sister." He placed his hat back on his head and tipped it politely before turning to leave. Catherine watched him walk away, his long stride confident and unhurried. She sat frozen on the bench, her mind racing. Every sensible thought told her this was foolish, that accepting such an offer from a stranger was dangerous. But desperation made fools of even the most cautious people, and something in William Preston's eyes had seemed genuine. She thought of Margaret, alone and frightened, waiting for her. 3 more days in Fort Worth would drain what little money Catherine had left for food and lodging, and there was no guarantee she could earn enough for the stagecoach fare in that time. This might be her only chance. Catherine stood, picked up her carpetbag, and walked toward the hotel district. She had some thinking to do. The Cattleman's Hotel was nicer than anywhere Catherine could afford to stay. She found a boarding house 2 streets away that rented rooms for 50 cents a night and took one, spending the evening in prayer and contemplation. She read through Margaret's letters again, hearing her sister's voice in the careful handwriting. Margaret had always been the brave one, the one who took chances and chased dreams. She had fallen in love with Thomas Harrison and followed him to Texas without a second thought. If Margaret could be that brave, Surely Catherine could accept help when it was offered. As dawn painted the Texas sky in shades of pink and gold, Catherine stood outside the cattleman's hotel with her carpetbag clutched in both hands. She had barely slept, alternating between certainty and doubt throughout the long night. But here she was, and here came William Preston, leading a sturdy wagon pulled by two strong horses. "Miss Taylor," he greeted her with a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I am glad you came." "I appreciate your generosity more than I can say, Mr. Preston." "William, please. We will be traveling companions for the next several days. No need for such formality." He took her carpetbag and placed it carefully in the back of the wagon, which was loaded with supplies covered by canvas tarps. "Mrs. Chen will be here shortly. She had some last-minute shopping to do." As if summoned by her name, an older Chinese woman appeared, carrying a basket and wearing a practical traveling dress. Her face was lined with age, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. She looked Catherine up and down with frank assessment. "So you are the young lady William mentioned, Mrs. Chen said in perfect English with only the slightest accent. "I am pleased to meet you, Miss Taylor. It will be nice to have another woman for company on this journey. William is a good man, but not much for conversation." William laughed, a warm sound that made Catherine smile despite her nervousness. "I talk plenty, and you know it. About cattle and horses and weather, yes, very stimulating." Mrs. Chen's dry tone made it clear she was teasing, and the easy rapport between her and William helped Catherine relax further. William helped both women into the wagon seat, then climbed up himself and took the reins. As they rolled out of Fort Worth, Catherine took one last look at the town that had nearly trapped her in despair. The morning sun felt like a blessing on her face. The first day of travel passed more pleasantly than Catherine had expected. The road south was well traveled, and they saw other wagons, riders, and even a small cattle drive in the distance. William proved to be exactly as Mrs. Chen had described, a man of few words but deep thoughtfulness. When he did speak, it was usually to point out landmarks or share practical information about the territory. Mrs. Chen, by contrast, was quite talkative once she warmed up. She told Catherine about coming to America from China 20 years ago, about her late husband who had worked on the railroads, about her daughter who had married a merchant in Austin. "And what about you, dear Mrs. Chen asked as they stopped at midday to rest the horses and eat a simple meal of bread, cheese, and dried fruit. "How did you come to be alone in Fort Worth with no money for passage?" Catherine found herself sharing her story. She told them about growing up in Philadelphia, about her father's work as a schoolteacher and her mother's skill with a needle, about the fever that had swept through the city last winter, taking both her parents within days of each other, about selling everything to make the journey west, about miscalculating how expensive the trip would be. "I thought I had planned so carefully," Catherine said, staring at the piece of bread in her hands, "but I did not account for all the small expenses along the way. A meal here, a night's lodging there, it added up faster than I expected." "You are not the first person to learn that lesson the hard way," William said quietly. He sat against a wagon wheel, his hat tipped back, his long legs stretched out before him. "The frontier has a way of teaching humility to everyone who comes here." "Is that how you learned it?" Catherine asked before she could stop herself. "I apologize. That was too personal. No, it is a fair question." William gazed out at the rolling landscape, his expression distant. "I came to Texas 7 years ago with nothing but a horse and a determination to make something of myself. I worked as a ranch hand for a man named Joseph Whitfield. He was getting on in years and had no children. He taught me everything about ranching, about this land, about building something that lasts." William's voice grew soft with memory. "When he died 3 years ago, I was shocked to learn he had left the ranch to me, said I was like the son he never had." "That was quite a gift, Mrs. Chen said gently. "It was, and it came with a responsibility. Joseph built that ranch from nothing, and I intend to honor his memory by making it thrive." William looked at Catherine then, and she felt the intensity of his gaze. "That is why I understand about promises to family. Joseph was not blood, but he was family just the same. When someone needs us, we show up. That is what matters." They rode on through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing as they traveled south. Catherine found herself watching William when she thought he was not looking. There was something solid about him, something steady and reliable that she had rarely encountered in men. He handled the horses with gentle competence, navigated the rough roads with ease, and remained unfailingly courteous without being obsequious. That night, they camped under the stars. William set up a small tent for the women and laid out his bedroll near the fire. He cooked a simple but satisfying meal of beans and salt pork, and they ate while watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple. "I have never seen sky like this," Catherine said, staring up at the emerging stars. "In Philadelphia, there were always so many buildings, so much smoke from chimneys. Here it feels endless." "That is what I love most about Texas," William said. "The space. The feeling that you can breathe all the way down to your toes." Mrs. Chen chuckled. "Poetic for a rancher. Even ranchers have souls, last I checked." Catherine smiled at their banter. She felt safer than she had in months, which seemed absurd given that she was camping in the wilderness with near strangers. But William's quiet competence and Mrs. Chen's sharp-eyed kindness had combined to create an unexpected sense of security. The second day brought them to Austin, where they parted ways with Mrs. Chen. Her daughter and son-in-law met them at the edge of town, and the older woman embraced Catherine warmly. "You take care, dear girl," Mrs. Chen said. "And William, you behave like the gentleman I know you to be." "Always, madam," William replied with a small smile. As they continued south without their chaperone, Catherine felt her earlier nervousness return. She was now alone with William Preston, trusting her safety and reputation to a man she had known for less than 2 days. But as the hours passed and William remained nothing but respectful and kind, her tension eased. They talked more without Mrs. Chen there to fill the silences. William asked about Catherine's life in Philadelphia, and she found herself sharing memories she had not spoken aloud since her parents died. The joy of helping her father prepare lessons for his students. The satisfaction of completing a particularly complicated embroidery pattern with her mother. The small, ordinary moments that had made up her life. In turn, William spoke about the ranch. She could hear the love in his voice when he described the land, the cattle, the work of building something with his own hands. He talked about his cowhands, a small crew of loyal men who had worked for Joseph and stayed on with William. About the challenges of drought and disease, of markets and prices, of the constant gamble that was raising livestock in unpredictable country. "You ever get lonely?" Catherine asked as they made camp that second night. Living so far from town, working all the time, William was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Joseph used to say that a ranch needed a woman's touch to truly be a home. He never married himself, said he was too set in his ways by the time he realized what he was missing. I always thought I would marry eventually, but ranching is demanding work. There is never enough time and the women in town." He trailed off, shaking his head. "I suppose I have not met someone who understood what this life requires." "What does it require?" "Strength, patience, the ability to find joy in small things because the big victories are rare and hard won, someone who sees the beauty in this land instead of just the harshness. He looked at Catherine, and the firelight made his eyes seem darker, more intense. Someone who is not afraid of hard work or long silences or uncertain futures. Catherine felt something flutter in her chest, a sensation she had not experienced before. She barely knew this man, and yet his words resonated with something deep inside her. She thought about her life in Philadelphia, the comfortable predictability of it. That life was gone now, and she had been grieving its loss. But what if loss was also an opening? What if the end of one life could be the beginning of another? She did not voice these thoughts. Instead, she said, "Your ranch sounds wonderful. I am sure you will find the right person to share it with someday." "Perhaps," William said, but he continued looking at her in a way that made her heart beat faster. The third day brought them closer to San Antonio. The landscape had changed again, becoming more arid, dotted with mesquite and prickly pear. The heat was more intense, and Catherine was grateful for the hat William had lent her to shield her face from the merciless sun. They stopped at midday beside a small creek to water the horses and rest. Catherine knelt by the water, splashing her face and neck, feeling the dust of travel wash away. When she stood and turned, she found William watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Miss Taylor." "Catherine," he said, and her name sounded different in his mouth, softer somehow. "May I speak plainly with you?" "Of course." He took a step closer, close enough that she could see the exact color of his eyes, like a winter sky heavy with snow. "These past few days traveling with you have been. They have meant something to me, more than I expected when I offered you passage." Catherine's breath caught. "William." "Please, let me finish. I know this is sudden. I know you are on your way to your sister and you have your own troubles to deal with. But I find myself not wanting this journey to end, not wanting to say goodbye when we reach San Antonio." He removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that seemed nervous. "I would like permission to call on you, to see if what I am feeling might be something you could feel too, given time." "You barely know me," Catherine whispered, but her heart was pounding. "I know enough. I know you are brave enough to cross the country alone for your sister. I know you are kind and thoughtful and you see beauty in this land. I know that when you smile, which you do not do often enough, it is like sunrise." He smiled ruefully. "Mrs. Chen was wrong. I can be poetic when properly motivated." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes, but these were different from the desperate tears she had shed at the Fort Worth station. "I do not know what to say. Say you will allow me to call on you. Say you will give me a chance to show you what my heart is feeling." She looked at this man who had appeared in her moment of greatest need, who had asked for nothing in return, who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. She thought about his ranch, about wide open spaces and endless sky. She thought about his gentle hands on the horse's reins, his patient explanations of the land they traveled through, the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching. "Yes," she heard herself say. "Yes, you may call on me." The smile that broke across William's face was like sunshine, bright and warm and genuine. He took her hand, his calloused palm gentle against her skin, and raised it to his lips in a gesture that was both old-fashioned and deeply romantic. "You have made me very happy, Catherine." They reached San Antonio late the following afternoon. The town was larger than Fort Worth, busier and more established. William had been here before and knew his way to the address Catherine provided from Margaret's letters. The Harrison residence was a modest but tidy house on a quiet street. Before William could help Catherine down from the wagon, the front door flew open and Margaret emerged, her pregnancy evident in her rounded belly and the way she moved carefully down the steps. "Catherine." Margaret's face was alight with joy and relief. "Oh, Catherine, you came." The sisters embraced, both crying now, and William stepped back to give them privacy. Catherine held her sister tightly, feeling Margaret's swollen belly press between them, feeling the familiar comfort of the only family she had left. "Let me look at you," Margaret said, pulling back to examine Catherine's face. "You look so tired. How did you get here? Your letter said you would be coming by stage." "It is a long story," Catherine said, wiping her eyes. "Margaret, this is William Preston. He gave me passage when I could not afford the stage coach." Margaret turned to William with an expression of such gratitude that it made him duck his head shyly. "Mr. Preston, I cannot thank you enough. My sister is everything to me." "It was my honor, madam," William said. "And please call me William." Margaret's sharp eyes moved between William and Catherine, and a knowing smile touched her lips. She had always been able to read Catherine like a book. "Will you stay for supper, William? It is the least we can do to thank you for bringing my sister safely to me." William glanced at Catherine, who nodded encouragingly. "I would like that, thank you." Thomas Harrison arrived home an hour later, a kind-faced man in his early 30s who clearly adored his wife. Over a meal of roasted chicken and vegetables, Catherine shared a carefully edited version of her journey, leaving out the depths of her desperation in Fort Worth, but including William's generous offer of help. "We are in your debt, sir," Thomas said, shaking William's hand firmly. "If there is ever anything we can do for you, you need only ask." "Just take good care of these sisters," William replied. "That is thanks enough." As the evening wore on, William prepared to take his leave. He had business to attend to in San Antonio that would keep him in town for a few days, and he had already secured a room at a hotel. Catherine walked him out to the wagon, the night air warm and fragrant with the scent of flowering plants she could not name. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything. I know I have said it before, but I need you to know how much it meant, how much you have changed my life." William took her hand in his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "May I call on you tomorrow, take you to dinner, perhaps? I would like that very much." He lingered for a moment, looking as if he wanted to say more or perhaps do more, but propriety held him back. Instead, he raised her hand to his lips once more, his eyes never leaving hers. "Until tomorrow, then. Good night, Catherine." "Good night, William." She watched him drive away, her hand still tingling from his touch, her heart fuller than it had been in months. Back inside, Margaret pounced immediately. "Tell me everything, and do not leave anything out." Catherine found herself sharing the whole story, from her tears on the Fort Worth station platform to William's declaration by the creek. Margaret listened with wide eyes, occasionally touching her belly as the baby moved. "He sounds wonderful," Margaret said when Catherine finished. "And the way you talk about him, sister, I have never heard you speak of any man that way." "It is too fast," Catherine protested weakly. "I have known him less than a week." "Thomas proposed to me after 2 weeks," Margaret countered. "When you know, you know." "The question is, how do you feel about him?" Catherine thought about William's steady presence, his kindness, the way he made her feel safe and seen. She thought about his ranch and his dreams, about the love in his voice when he spoke of the land. She thought about his eyes, storm cloud blue, and the way they softened when he looked at her. "I think I might be falling in love with him," she admitted, the words both thrilling and terrifying. Margaret squeezed her hand. "Then see where it leads. You deserve happiness, Catherine. You deserve love." William called on Catherine the next day, dressed in his finest clothes, which were still simple ranch wear but clean and well kept. He took her to dinner at a nice restaurant where they talked for hours. He told her more about the ranch, about his hopes for the future. She told him about her skills with a needle, about the books she loved to read, about her dreams that had seemed so small in Philadelphia but might be different here. Over the following days, as William attended to his business in San Antonio, they spent every possible moment together. He showed her the mission churches, the river walk, the busy markets. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's thoughts and dreams and fears. Margaret watched with approval, her hand often resting on her belly as she observed Catherine blooming under William's attention. "He is good for you," she told Catherine one evening. "You smile again. You look alive in a way you have not since Mama and Papa died." "He wants me to visit the ranch," Catherine said. "Before he returns, he wants me to see it to understand what his life is really like." "Will you go?" "Yes." "But Margaret, your baby is due soon. I cannot leave you." "The baby is not due for another month at least," Margaret assured her. "Go see his ranch, Catherine. See if you can imagine a life there. I will be fine and you will only be gone a few days." So Catherine found herself once again in William's wagon, this time traveling northwest toward his ranch. The journey took 2 days, and every mile brought them into more open country, farther from civilization. Catherine saw her first real cattle drive, hundreds of longhorns moving across the landscape like a living river. She saw wild horses running free, their manes streaming in the wind. She saw land that stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and harsh and untamed. The Preston Ranch, when they finally arrived, took Catherine's breath away. It was not large or fancy, but it was well kept and clearly built with care. The main house was sturdy wood with a wide porch that faced east to catch the morning sun. There was a barn, a bunkhouse for the hands, several corrals with horses, and beyond it all, grazing land that seemed to go on forever. William's cowhands greeted them with curious but friendly faces. There was Marcus, a former slave who had headed west after the war ended and proven himself one of the best horsemen in Texas. There was young Tommy, barely 20, full of enthusiasm and energy. There was quiet Roberto, who spoke little but worked harder than anyone. And there was old Charlie, who had worked for Joseph Whitfield for 30 years and stayed on because, as he said, the ranch was the only home he had ever known. "Welcome to the ranch, miss," Charlie said, tipping his hat. "It is nice to have a lady visit. Place needs that kind of presence." William showed Catherine everything. The house was simple inside, functional but comfortable. The furniture was well made but plain. The kitchen was large and well stocked. Upstairs were 3 bedrooms, one of which William used and the others sitting empty. "Joseph always said he built this house for a family," William explained as they stood in one of the empty rooms, golden afternoon light streaming through the window. Said just because he never had one did not mean the house should not be ready for one someday. Catherine walked to the window and looked out at the land, at the endless sky, at the cattle dotting the distant hills. She tried to imagine living here, miles from the nearest town, with only William and the cowhands for company. It should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like coming home. "It is beautiful, William," she said quietly. He came to stand beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "I want you to see it as it really is, not just the pretty sunset but the hard work, the isolation. The way winter can be brutal and summer can be merciless. I want you to know what you would be choosing." Catherine turned to face him. "Why? We have known each other such a short time. Why are you so certain?" "Because from the moment I saw you crying on that bench in Fort Worth, something in me recognized something in you," William said, his voice low and intense. "I have never been a man who acts rashly. I have never been swept away by feeling. But Catherine, you swept me away. And I find I do not want to be found." Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must hear it. "William, I love you," he said simply. "I know it is too soon. I know you need time, but I love you, and I need you to know that before you decide whether you could ever build a life here." Catherine had never heard 3 words that felt more right. She reached up, her hand trembling slightly, and touched his face. His skin was warm beneath her palm, slightly rough with stubble, solid and real. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not think it was possible to feel this way so quickly, but I do. I love you, William Preston." He pulled her into his arms then, holding her close, and Catherine felt like she had finally found the place she was meant to be. When he kissed her, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. The world seemed to stop, narrowing down to just the two of them, 2 hearts beating in rhythm. They spent the next 2 days exploring the ranch together. William taught Catherine to ride properly, patient with her inexperience. They rode out to see the cattle, the water sources, the boundaries of his land. He introduced her to every aspect of the ranch, holding nothing back. In the evenings, they sat on the porch and talked about the future. William spoke of his dreams to expand the herd, to build the ranch into something that could support a family. Catherine talked about wanting to create a real home, to maybe start a school for the ranch children in the area someday. "There are not many schools out here," William said thoughtfully. "Your father was a teacher. You could carry on that legacy." The idea took root in Catherine's mind, growing and blooming. Yes, she could do that. She could honor her parents' memory by bringing education to this wild place. On their last night before returning to San Antonio, William took Catherine's hand as they watched the sun set. "Catherine Taylor," he said formally, then dropped to one knee. "I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other a short while. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to build a home with you, raise children with you, grow old with you on this land. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Catherine's face as she nodded. "Yes. Yes, William, I will marry you." He slipped a ring onto her finger, a simple gold band with a small diamond that had been his mother's, the only thing he had left of his family. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. They married 6 weeks later in San Antonio, with Margaret and Thomas as witnesses and Margaret's newborn son sleeping peacefully in his mother's arms. Margaret had given birth to a healthy baby boy she named Joseph, after her father, and she was glowing with health and happiness. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Catherine wore a dress of pale blue that Margaret had helped her sew, and William wore his best suit. When they exchanged vows, Catherine felt the rightness of it down to her bones. This was where she was meant to be, with this man, building this life. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Catherine had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings and late nights, the way weather dictated everything. She learned to cook for hungry cowhands, to preserve food for winter, to make a little go a long way. The isolation was hard sometimes, especially when she missed Margaret, but William's steady presence made everything bearable. She started her school, just a small thing at first. A few children from neighboring ranches would ride over twice a week, and Catherine would teach them reading, writing, and arithmetic at the kitchen table. Word spread, and soon she had 8 regular students. William built her a small schoolhouse near the main house, a one-room building with benches and a chalkboard and windows that let in good light. "I am so proud of you," he told her on the day the school opened, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they looked at the building together. "I could not have done it without you," Catherine replied, leaning back into his warmth. The ranch prospered under William's careful management. A good spring meant healthy calves. The cattle drive that fall brought excellent prices. William hired 2 more hands and bought more land. The ranch was growing, and so was their love. On their first anniversary, Catherine told William she was expecting a child. The joy on his face was something she would remember for the rest of her life. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure happiness. "We are going to be parents," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are," Catherine agreed, her own happiness bubbling up like a spring. Their son was born the following summer, a healthy baby with his father's blue-gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Joseph William Preston, after the two men who had shaped William's life. Holding her son for the first time, Catherine thought about how far she had come from that desperate moment on the Fort Worth station platform. If someone had told her then that crying over $2 would lead to this, to a husband she adored and a child she cherished and a life that felt full to bursting, she never would have believed them. Margaret visited often with her growing family. Little Joseph Harrison now had a sister, and Margaret was pregnant again. The sisters would sit on the porch while their children played, talking and laughing and marveling at how their lives had turned out. "You ever miss Philadelphia?" Margaret asked one afternoon. Catherine considered the question, watching William in the distance working with a new horse. "Sometimes I miss Mama and Papa, but the life we had there. No, this is home now. This land, this ranch, William and our son, this is where I belong." The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and work and love. Catherine's school grew until it served 20 children from ranches all over the region. She hired a young woman to help teach, freeing up time to focus on her growing family. Joseph was joined by 2 daughters, Alina and Rose, and then another son, Thomas, named for Margaret's husband. The ranch continued to prosper. William's reputation as an honest dealer and skilled rancher spread. Young men sought work with him because he treated his hands fairly and paid well. The Preston Ranch became known throughout Texas, and William and Catherine became pillars of the growing community. On their 10th anniversary, William took Catherine on a trip back to Fort Worth. The town had grown and changed, but the stagecoach station was still there. They stood together on the platform where they had first met, and William pulled her close. "You remember what you said that day?" he asked. "I said I could not afford passage," Catherine replied, smiling at the memory, "and I paid your way. But do you remember what I asked for in return?" Catherine frowned, thinking back. "You did not ask for anything. You said you were helping because someone had helped you once." William smiled, that warm sunshine smile she loved so much. "That is true. But in my heart I was already asking. I was asking for the only thing that mattered." He took her face in his hands, his calloused thumbs gentle on her cheeks. "I was asking for your heart, and you gave it to me along with everything else. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose beyond just surviving. You gave me love. You gave me the same," Catherine whispered. "You gave me everything, William. A life I never could have imagined. Happiness I did not think was possible." He kissed her there on the platform, in the exact spot where their story had begun, and Catherine felt the circle of their love complete itself. They traveled on to San Antonio, where Margaret and Thomas now ran a successful mercantile. Margaret's family had grown to 5 children, and the sisters spent a wonderful week together, watching their children play and sharing stories of their lives. "You know," Margaret said one evening as they sat on her porch, "I was so worried when Mama and Papa died. I was afraid you would give up, that the grief would swallow you whole." "I thought it might," Catherine admitted. "Those first months were so dark. If I had not had your letters, your invitation to come here, I do not know what I would have done. But you were brave. You came all this way with almost nothing. I had no choice. And then when I did not have enough money for the stage, I thought it was over. I thought I had failed." Catherine smiled, remembering. And then William appeared, like an answer to a prayer I had not even finished praying. "Some things are meant to be," Margaret said softly. "Some people are meant to find each other." As Catherine and William traveled back to the ranch with their children, Catherine reflected on the truth of Margaret's words. She thought about chance and choice, about how one moment of desperation had led to a lifetime of love. If the stagecoach had been cheaper, if she had had those extra few dollars, she would have gone straight to San Antonio and never met William. She would have missed everything that made her life worth living. The children chattered excitedly in the back of the wagon, but William and Catherine rode in comfortable silence, her hand in his. The Texas landscape rolled past, beautiful in its harshness, home in every way that mattered. 20 years after that first meeting in Fort Worth, Catherine stood on the porch of the ranch house and looked out at everything they had built together. The ranch had tripled in size. The school now had its own building in the nearby town that had sprung up, with 3 teachers and over 60 students. Her children were growing into fine young people. Joseph, at 19, was learning to run the ranch alongside his father. Eleanor, at 16, was training to be a teacher like her mother. Rose, at 13, showed a gift for music and art that amazed everyone. And young Thomas, at 10, was already proving to be a natural horseman. William came out to join her, his hair now shot through with silver, his face more lined but his eyes still that same storm cloud blue that had captured her heart so long ago. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "Everything," Catherine said. "How we got here. How one moment changed both our lives forever. Do you have any regrets?" She turned to face him fully, this man who had given her everything, who had kept every promise he made that day by the creek. "Not a single one. You asked for my heart, William Preston, and I gave it to you gladly. It was the best bargain I ever made." He kissed her, and after 20 years of marriage, it still felt like coming home. Their story became something of a legend in the area. People told it around campfires and dinner tables, the tale of the desperate young woman and the kind rancher who helped her. Some versions made it more dramatic, adding dangers that never existed. Others made it more romantic, inventing grand gestures that were not necessary because the truth was romantic enough. But Catherine and William did not care what stories people told. They knew the truth of their love, and that was enough. As the years continued to pass, they watched their children grow and start families of their own. Joseph married a schoolteacher and brought her to live on the ranch, ready to take over when William eventually retired. Eleanor married a lawyer and moved to Austin, where she opened a school for girls. Rose became an artist whose paintings of Texas landscapes sold throughout the country. And Thomas, after sowing some wild oats, settled down with the daughter of a neighboring rancher and proved himself as capable as his father at raising cattle. Catherine and William became grandparents many times over, and they loved watching their children's children run through the same rooms where their own children had grown up. The ranch house was filled with noise and laughter during family gatherings, exactly as Joseph Whitfield had dreamed it would be. On their 40th anniversary, their children threw them a grand celebration. People came from all over Texas to honor the couple who had become symbols of enduring love and hard work. There were speeches and toasts, music and dancing, food and fellowship. But Catherine's favorite moment came late in the evening, when she and William slipped away from the party to walk down to the creek where he had first told her he was falling in love with her. They were both older now, moving more slowly, but their hands still fit together perfectly. 40 years, William said, shaking his head in wonder. "It seems like both forever and no time at all." "I know what you mean," Catherine agreed. "Sometimes I still feel like that desperate girl on the station platform. Other times I cannot even remember who I was before I met you." "You were brave and beautiful and strong," William said. "You still are. You just did not know it yet." They stood by the water, listening to it burble over the rocks, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The same stars that had watched over them on their first journey together, the same sky that had blessed their love from the beginning. "If you could go back," William said thoughtfully, "and tell that crying girl what was coming, would you?" Catherine considered it. "No. I think some things you have to discover for yourself. And besides, I would not trade a single moment of our journey, even the hard parts. They made us who we are." "Wise woman," William said, kissing her temple. "I learned from the best." They walked back to the party hand in hand, ready to celebrate with the family and community they had built together. And as Catherine looked around at all the faces, at the life that had grown from a single act of kindness on a desperate day, she felt overwhelming gratitude. She had cried that she could not afford passage, and William had paid her way. But he had not asked for money or servitude or anything except her heart. And in giving him her heart, she had received everything she never knew she needed. That was the true bargain they had struck. Not passage for payment, but love for love. Heart for heart. Life for life. And it was a bargain they honored every single day for all the days they had together. Years later, when Catherine was well into her 70s and William's hair had gone completely white, they still sat together on the porch every evening, watching the sun set over the land they loved. Their children were scattered across Texas and beyond, but the ranch remained the heart of the family, the place everyone returned to for holidays and celebrations. Catherine's school legacy had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. There were now 3 schools in the region that traced their founding back to her kitchen table lessons, and 2 of her granddaughters were teachers carrying on the tradition. William had finally retired from active ranching, turning operations over to Joseph and Thomas, who ran it together with the same care and dedication their father had shown. The Preston Ranch was now one of the most respected spreads in Texas, known for quality cattle and ethical business practices. One evening, as they sat watching another spectacular sunset, William took Catherine's hand. "I need you to know something," he said, his voice still strong despite his age. "What is that?" "Every morning when I wake up next to you, I still thank God for that day in Fort Worth. For your tears and your desperation and your courage to accept help from a stranger." Catherine squeezed his hand. "I thank him, too, for your kindness, for your heart, for the way you saw me when I could not see myself." "We saved each other," William said simply. "Yes," Catherine agreed. "We did." They lived several more good years together, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. When William finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 82, Catherine held his hand and whispered her love to him one last time. She lived another 3 years after that, spending her time writing down the story of their love for future generations. She wanted her grandchildren and great-grandchildren to know how it had all begun, how something beautiful could grow from something desperate, how love could transform everything. Catherine Taylor Preston died peacefully in the ranch house William had shown her so long ago, surrounded by family, her final words a whisper of his name. They buried her beside him on a hill overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the land they had built together. Their headstone was simple: William Preston, 1845–1927, Catherine Taylor Preston, 1851–1930. Heart for heart, love for love. And on summer evenings when the grandchildren gathered at the ranch for reunions, someone always told the story. The story of how their grandmother had cried that she could not afford passage, and their grandfather had paid her way and asked only for her heart. How she had given it freely, and how that single exchange had created a legacy that would endure for generations. It was a story about chance and choice, about kindness and courage, about faith and love. But more than anything, it was a story about two people who found each other when they needed it most and built something beautiful together. And every time the story was told, the listeners would sigh and smile, knowing that true love, the kind that lasts forever, really did exist. Because they had seen the proof of it in William and Catherine Preston, in the ranch they built, in the family they raised, in the love that still seemed to linger in every sunset over the Texas hills. Their love story became a part of the land itself, woven into the history of the Preston Ranch as surely as the grass and the cattle and the endless sky. And it lived on, inspiring new generations to believe in the transforming power of love, in the importance of kindness to strangers, in the truth that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when we are most vulnerable and most brave. The ranch continued to thrive long after they were gone, run by their descendants who carried forward the values William and Catherine had lived by: hard work, integrity, compassion, and love. The schools Catherine had started continued to educate children throughout Texas. And every so often, someone would discover the journals Catherine had kept, reading her elegant handwriting and seeing the love pour off every page. In those journals, she had written about ordinary days made extraordinary by love. About the first time William taught her to rope a calf, and how they had laughed together when she fell in the mud. About the births of each of their children and William's tears of joy every time. About quiet mornings drinking coffee on the porch and loud evenings with the house full of family. About disagreements and make-ups, challenges and triumphs, sorrows and celebrations. She had written about the texture of their life together, the small moments that added up to forever. And through it all, one theme remained constant: gratitude. Gratitude for the chance meeting, for William's kindness, for the love that had blessed them both. On the final page of her final journal, written just days before her death, Catherine had penned these words: "To whoever reads this in the future, know that love is real. It is not just something in fairy tales or romantic novels. It exists in the everyday moments, in the choice to be kind, in the courage to accept help, in the willingness to open your heart even when you are afraid." William and I were not perfect people. We had our struggles and our failings. But we loved each other truly, and that love made everything else possible. If you are reading this, my hope for you is simple: be brave enough to love and generous enough to be loved in return. That is the secret to a life well lived. And so the story of Catherine and William Preston lived on, a testament to the power of love to transform lives, to build legacies, to create something lasting and beautiful from a single moment of desperate tears and unexpected kindness. In the end, Catherine had been wrong that day in Fort Worth when she cried that she could not afford passage. The truth was, she could not afford not to take the passage William offered. Because in accepting his help, in trusting a stranger, in opening her heart to possibility, she had found not just a way to San Antonio, but a way to the life she was meant to live and the love she was meant to share. And William, who had paid her way and asked only for her heart, had received far more than he ever bargained for. He had received a partner, a lover, a friend, a mother for his children, and a co-builder of dreams. He had received a love that sustained him through every challenge and celebrated him through every triumph. They had both gotten the better end of the bargain, and they had both known it every single day of their lives together. That was the real magic of their story. Not that it was a fairy tale where everything was perfect, but that it was a real love between real people who chose each other, again and again, through all the days of their lives. And somewhere on a hill overlooking a ranch in Texas, Their spirits still watched over the land they loved, together as they had always been, heart to heart, love, forever and always.